There we go. Yes. Good morning, wisdom seekers. I am your host, Brian Sexton, filling in for the great Kevin Ward. And I do say that with all meaning and purpose behind that. I love my dear friend, Kevin Ward. He is a tremendous friend, tremendous man. It is a cold West Virginia morning, as you can tell by the sweater that I have on this morning. And we're a little more prepared using StreamYard. I will say this: my microphone seems a little slanted, so I'm going to try to see if I can straighten that up. Yeah, there we go. Good morning, wisdom seekers. It is such a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I am excited. If you've got a comment to share, if you got anything to add this morning, glad to have you for the next hour. We're going to talk about the wisdom of legacy, And I tell you what, the wisdom of legacy is so important. It's so important in what we do because, again, legacy, and Kevin and I were talking about this. We were talking about the wisdom of legacy. And the wisdom of legacy is important for a lot of reasons. Excuse me, I'm still dealing with a little bit of a voice issue. The wisdom of legacy is important. And I told Kevin this. This is why I wanted to talk about the wisdom of legacy, is because what you're doing now on planet Earth is going to sustain you long after you leave planet Earth. I was watching something the other day. Excuse me. Was watching something the other day on YouTube. I was watching a show called Who Do You Think You Are? And I was watching the episode on Tim McGraw. And if you know anything about the story of Tim McGraw, country music singer, was born Timmy Smith. And he was born and raised down in Louisiana. But there was something about him that just didn't look like his stepdad. There were just questions about his life. And then he finds a birth certificate with his birth name scratched out. And his mom's husband's name written in there. And what he found out was his favorite baseball player, grew up playing baseball. His favorite baseball player was a guy named Tug McGraw. I remember Tug McGraw. I was a child of the 80s. Tug McGraw would take his right hand, he'd slap it against his thigh before he'd get ready to pitch. And he was a relief pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies. He started out with the New York Mets, and then came to play for the Philadelphia Phillies. And it was their slogan in 1980 that helped them win the World Series. You gotta believe. And so Tug McGraw, known for this you gotta believe, it doesn't incite the Phillies, but inspires the Phillies on to winning the World Series in 1980. And this is Tim McGraw's favorite baseball player. Now he finds out it's his biological father. So he said when he was 18 years old, he schedules a meeting with Tug McGraw. And Tim says, I got one question for you. He said, do you believe I'm your son? And Tug said, yeah, I do. And that started a relationship with him and his dad that carried on until Tug McGraw passed away of brain cancer in 2004. And so Tim McGraw wants to find out more about the McGraw side of the family. Well, he finds out that on his mom's side, his descendants go all the way back to Virginia. And his like 8th or 9th great grandfather in 1748 hosts a young George Washington at their home in Virginia. And so, folks, that's why legacy is so important. In our family, we've done some genealogical studies. Listen, if you have descendants, and I know a lot of you that watch Kevin's show, you're watching from all over the world. If you have descendants from North America, from the United States, chances are they go through the state of Virginia at some point. In doing our geological research on our family, on the Sexton family, we find out that the Sextons were prominent members. They were prominent people in the Southwest Virginia area. And so I think it's like my great, like 4 generations back. And there's a book that I need to get. It's called The Early Adventures of the Western Frontier, Volume 4. Anybody knows where I can get it? I know where I can get a copy of that, but if anybody's read that book, that'd be awesome to I am going to get a copy of that book. But back in the 1840s, 1830s, 40s, and 50s, Sextons were very prominent people in southwestern Virginia. They were known for leather and tannery and very skilled people like that. I don't know how to make anything leather. I buy all my leather goods. So I am not, that is not a skill that was passed down through the generations. That did not come your boy's way. Let's just say that. So not a skill that I have acquired. But that's the legacy of my family. That's the legacy of understanding where you've come from. And there's wisdom there. If we don't, the famous quote is, if we don't learn from the mistakes of our past, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And so by understanding the legacy that we're creating from seeking wisdom, then we understand we understand what wisdom does for us. So I am going to share with you some questions, and I want to get your thoughts on these questions. I really want to get your thoughts around this. If you're watching this morning, then let's talk about these different things that are going on. Does legacy affect us internally, whether we're planning for it or not? It's the first question. Does legacy, and I'm going to put it up in the comments here. Does legacy affect us internally, whether we're planning for it or not? All right. Does legacy affect us internally? And I'm going to tell you that the answer is a resounding yes. Legacy does affect us internally. Okay. I'll share with you why. I'll share with you a little bit of my story for those of you that don't know my story. right above me, and I'm pointing to the picture, right above me is a picture of my late father. My father passed away December 6th, 2012. December 6th, 2012. So my dad has been gone almost 11 years. Not a day that goes by I don't miss my dad. Not a day that goes by I don't think about him. Not a day that goes by that I don't wish he weren't here. I wish every day that my dad were here. There's so much that I want to talk to my dad about. So many things that have happened. You know, people say, well, you know, and I've said this before. If God said, you can have an hour to talk to your dad, well, the thing I'd want to do is I'd want to give 30 minutes of it to my wife, Tanya, so she could talk to her dad. I'd take the other 30 minutes. But if then it got down to, hey, you got 5 minutes to talk to your dad. The thing I'm doing in 5 minutes is real simple. I'm taking the first 30 seconds to give my dad a hug and tell him I love him and I've missed him. And then I break out my phone and show him pictures of his grandkids. And then I would say, hey, listen, I want you to know I've really been trying hard to keep your memory and your legacy alive. And I have. And so, yes, legacy does affect us internally. It should. It should affect us internally. Major things we do in life, major decisions that we make in life, the problem is that we make them in the moment, and we make them for the moment. The best leaders in companies are making decisions with the end in mind. It's Stephen Covey. We talked about Stephen Covey last week. Begin with the end in mind. But here's the thing that we realize, and we don't realize it early enough in life. We don't realize early enough in life, folks, that legacy should be begun to be built early in our lives. But we don't think about it. I'll never forget a conversation. I was 23 years old, and I'm at a company meeting. It's my first job. I'm at a company meeting, and the owner of our company, I worked for a small food brokerage company. It was small in the number of employees, but it was big in the realm of our industry. Sharon, good morning. Thank you. God bless you. Don't apologize at all for being late. I was almost late, so don't worry about it. But we're sitting in this sales meeting, and this guy comes in to talk about our boss, Harry, and we lost Harry. We lost Harry last year. I was crushed. I was crushed. My first boss. I loved Harry. Got to see Harry 3 or 4 years ago. Spent a couple hours just talking with him and having coffee with him and showing my appreciation, and that was beautiful. We go to this meeting, and they're talking about implementing 401ks. And the older folks in our company, the guys and gals that were in their 40s and 50s at that time, and that was almost 30 years ago, they were excited about getting to contribute to a 401k. And here I am, the young, stupid idiot in the room, 23 years old. I'm like, well, why do I need to put back 3 or 4% of my money? Rick, good morning. Why do I need to put 3 or 4% of my money there to do this 401k? And the guy looked at me and he said, you're exactly the guy I want to talk to. You're young. You've got the next 40 years of your life to invest. And of course, Who could have foreseen the 2008 recession and stock market collapse, where a lot of people lost a lot of money? Of course, what we're going through now with the stock market. My point is, had I been wiser in my early 20s, I probably would be a millionaire by now in 401k. I didn't see past next week. That was the unwise thing to do, was not to put myself in position to be able to be better prepared. Since then, we've course corrected and things like that. And so the wisdom of legacy should always be on our mind internally. My dad said something very important to me very early in my life. He said, if you say it, own it. And that's the same thing with legacy. It should affect us internally, because everything that we do should be building to the legacy that we leave. I had a guy say to me one time, I got a little overboard with carrying on my dad's legacy. I was trying too hard to keep it alive. And he looked at me and he said, Brian, your dad's legacy is cemented. It's already done. Tom Ziegler and I was telling you last week, I saw Tom Ziegler's a friend of mine. His father, Zig Ziglar, legendary speaker and motivator. I asked Tom that same question. I said, Tom, did you feel, what did you feel like when your dad died? Did you feel like you had to carry on that legacy? And Tom shared something with me that, you know what, Brian, my dad already cemented his legacy. It was just up to me now to take mine to the next level. All the work that my dad did in helping me get and pouring into me and doing things to help me, now it was my turn to carry that ball forward and further. And that's exactly what happens with us, is that, you know what, folks, it's our turn to move that forward. It's our turn to move that forward. It's our turn to equip our kids and our grandkids, our families, with what they need, so that if we take our last breath tomorrow, that our legacy will move on without us. So does it affect us internally, whether we plan for it or not? Yes. Yes. Wise people are always thinking about tomorrow. They're thinking about the next things ahead. And so, yes, it should absolutely affect us. What do you think? What do you think? Love to see it in the comments. The second question is, does legacy impact others around us, whether we plan for it or not? Does legacy affect others around us, whether we plan for it or not? And I can't type very well today. Kevin's such a pro at this. I'm good at live radio. I'm good at having a producer that would do all this stuff. I am good at that part of it. Does legacy affect others around us, whether we plan for it or not? I need to edit those comments. Ban user and delete their comments. I don't think I want to ban Kevin. So, does legacy affect others around us, whether we plan for it or not? The answer is yes. Yes. Everything we say and do affects others around us. Here's the thing that I'll share with you. In the last couple of weeks, I'm getting ready to transition to a new career path. And in the last week or so, as things started going around, I had people reach out to me and say, you helped me, you impacted me. I didn't realize that I was just trying to be me. I was just trying to be the man God made me to be. I didn't realize that by helping other people, it affected what I was doing, affected other people around me. Sharing this beautiful comment. I'm going to show this comment. It still did and does affect me internally. Both my mother and father passed away a long time ago. They taught me from a young age on to go out in the world, learn as much as you can about other people's religion and races so that you'll never be prejudiced. At the same time, never forget who you are. That is so true. Listen, let me tell you something. I grew up in a predominantly African-American neighborhood. I grew up in a little small town called Burlington, Ohio. If you Google Burlington, Ohio, it was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And this little town in southern Ohio, what would happen were oppressed people, slaves, would be in Virginia. At that time, there was no West Virginia. This was in the 1830s, 1840s. Excuse me, I got to keep the voice nice and lubricated here so I don't sound terrible. Like I hear it in my head, I'm like, I don't sound that great. But anyway, we lived in a small town in southern Ohio where the Ohio River separates now the state of West Virginia from the state of Ohio. And back in the 1830s and 1840s, even into the 1850s, before West Virginia became a state, it's not Western Virginia, it's West Virginia. We are a legitimate state. We are a legitimate state of the Union. But they would swim across the Ohio River. And once they would get on the shore of the river, they would go into the basement of this home, and there they would be free. And so, you know, I grew up hearing these stories, things like that. What really, sorry, folks, I got to switch to tea. I'm feeling it. Tea is a little better for the voice. There is a cemetery in Burlington, Ohio, that houses the graves of the original 37 who did that very thing. They swam across the Ohio River, and it's a couple miles long. Swimming across the Ohio River, coming across the Ohio River, and coming over and settling the town of Burlington, Ohio. And so from a young age, I was around diverse types of people. And in fact, saw an African-American gentleman that I graduated high school with, Mike Howard, and saw him at a high school football game a couple of weeks ago and just hugged him and embraced, and it was just a beautiful thing. I never knew any different. I didn't know any different. And so that's that, Sharon, to your point, that is such a beautiful thing of just understanding who people are and then just embracing who they are. That's wisdom right there. You don't have to agree with them politically. You don't have to agree with anything else. That's our problem today, folks. We don't find enough areas of common ground. The greatest legacies, the greatest relationships, the greatest influences are always found on common ground. I know I'm sidetracking a bit. I know I'm sidetracking a little bit, but I want to share something with you. A friend of mine, I have a good friend of mine who does morning talk radio. And he's of the Baptist denominational faith. I'm of the Pentecostal denominational faith. We're really good friends. And I had a guy of my denominational faith who came up to me and he said, I can't believe you and Tom are such good friends. How are you guys such good friends? Doesn't he know what you believe in? Because doctrinally there's large differences. And what I said to him, I said, we don't talk about the things we disagree on. We find those points where we come together and we focus on what's in common. Sharon, I love your comment, because it makes me understand that part of our legacy is building those relationships that can last generationally. Where Tom's kids can say, hey, I've known Bryce, my son. I've known Bryce all my life. Oh my goodness. His dad and my dad were friends. I know people like that to this day. My dad and their dad were dear friends. And so those relationships continue generationally. Legacy being passed. So yes, legacy does affect other people around you because of those generational things that are passed on. I have great relationships with folks that I didn't do much to cultivate. Why? It's because they love my dad. And so every time I'd see them, there was that connection. And so now every time I see them, I still feel that connection. It doesn't, my son, it's a little bit different with this generation, and we're working on that. But there are people that know me, know him, know his grandfather. Every time he sees them, it's the same thing. And so legacy does affect others around us, whether we plan for it or not. The greatest thing that we can do is just plan a life of consistency. That's the greatest piece of legacy that you can leave is a consistent life. I'm going to put that in the comments. The greatest piece of legacy is consistency. Right outside of the door to where I'm doing this show this morning, I can walk about 50 feet. And I can, a little bit longer than that, probably 100, 200 feet, something like that. But if I took the webcam and I walked outside and I showed you where I live, you'd see a brick house next door. That house was built by my wife's grandparents, Sherman and Winnie Fry. They built that house in 1948. That was 75 years ago. In 2020, we lost Sherman, 98 years old. The greatest thing that I remember about Sherman, the greatest lesson that Sherman left for me, the greatest piece of legacy was consistency. The reason that I have my house is because of Sherman's consistency. The reason that my wife and I have some things that we have is because of his consistency. Here's what I'm saying. In late 2013, my wife's grandmother passed away. But before she passed away, they celebrated 70 years of marriage. 70. Always faithful. I remember taking him down to the hospital so he could be down there with her. I remember the last time we saw my wife's grandmother in the hospital. Her granddad right by her side, holding her hand. Consistency, that's the greatest piece of legacy. And yes, it affects everybody around you. When you're consistent and you are living a consistent life, then everybody around you is affected by it. And I learned that from my wife's grandfather. Be consistent. Okay. Does legacy impact our thinking even if we're not consciously considering it? Put that in the comments. Does legacy affect our thinking even if we're not consciously? See, big words. Big words affect me early in the morning. Even if we're not consciously considering it. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Legacy should always affect our thought process. My question is this: why do people not commit crimes? And I'm not going to get into the politics of today and things like that. I believe our government is allowing lawlessness for certain folks. We're allowing lawlessness for certain folks. Forgive me, folks. I know that's not a good look on camera. Chugging a bottle of water, but I gotta keep the voice lubricated here. Our government is allowing lawlessness. That's not a political statement. That's a statement of fact. And so what keeps me, if I see, okay, well, somebody else did this and got away with it, so I could do that and get away with it. No, not at all. Why? Because my conscience says that's wrong. I do not intentionally want to do wrong things. You know, I don't lie. I don't steal. I don't cheat. Why? Because my conscience says that's wrong. My conscience says you might not want to do that. And so, because of my conscience, I don't do those things. I don't, and my wedding anniversary is Wednesday. I don't cheat on my wife. I've never have cheated on my wife. There's not a thought to cheat on my wife. Why? Because I love the Lord. That's a sin. That's a sin. And my wife will never trust me again. It will destroy our marriage and it will destroy our family. I don't want to do that. So the legacy that I want to build is that when my son has children, that he can look at me and his mom. We're not perfect, but he can look at me and his mom and go, boy, they love each other. Yeah, we do. Yeah, bud, we do. We do love each other. Want to treat his mom respectfully. Been times in my life I haven't always done that. But legacy is correctable. That's the beautiful part of it. I'm going to put that in the comments. Legacy is correctable. Here's why. Legacy is correctable. Just because you made a mistake today doesn't mean it affects you for the rest of your life. Sharon, thank you. Yes, values instilled in me. And it was having that just like you having that strong parental bond in place. I'll share a story with you. This has been a long time ago. There were some people that we knew that were going through marital infidelity issues. My dad and I are riding down the road. I'd been married about a year. And my dad and I were riding together, and we were talking about that situation. And my dad looked at me and he goes, "Son, I can help that guy." I said, "You can?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Not something I want to admit to my adult son, but I messed up on your mom. I messed up. But you know what? God forgave us. We worked it out. God forgave me. Your mom forgave me. We worked it out." And so the value that it instilled in me was I didn't want to let my wife down. And then even after my dad died, I didn't want to let my dad down. I didn't want that I did not want to let the legacy of my dad going, "Son, don't make that mistake in your marriage." You have to put deterrence in your path. Legacy, part of legacy, and I'm going to put this in the comments as well. A big part of legacy is setting the right deterrence. A big part of legacy is setting the right deterrence. I will not do this. I will not do that. I will not do something else. When we have those deterrents in place, then life gets easier to live. So when I go into a retail store, I'm not tempted to steal anything. If I don't have the money to buy it, I just don't buy it. No matter how great my desire is to have it, I just don't buy it. I get the money, or I go, okay, is it really that big of a need and desire? No matter if the most beautiful actress in the world would walk into this studio this morning, nobody any more beautiful in my life than my wife. Rick, that's a great point. A lot of today's problems go back to poor parenting. Some kids really don't have a chance out of the gate. Listen, dealing with a situation like that in my family. Dealing with a situation, boy, you are spot on the money. But here's the thing that I will say. Again, Rick, I think you bring up an outstanding point. Sometimes poor parenting is legacy driven. I'll share with you this story from my dad that he told me one time. Talk about legacy. My dad worked in Eastern Kentucky. If you know anything about this part of the country, coal mining is very prevalent. It's a generational lifestyle. So we've been mining coal in West Virginia for, probably 130 years or better. Since the early, maybe even the late 1800s. We've been coal mining in West Virginia and into Eastern Kentucky. So my dad goes and calls on this really large job site. And at that time, they're on strike. And here my dad's a salesman. He's making commission. He's got to feed his family. And my dad says, "Hey, guys, I respect your strike, but I got to go see this person. Good morning, Lee. Good to have you." And so he talked to him. They let him go in. He comes back out, and he says to one of them, he said, "Excuse me." He said, "Why are you striking? I want to understand why you're striking." And I'll say this in the Eastern Kentucky vernacular, okay? The guy looked at my dad. He said, "My daddy struck. My granddaddy struck. Bless God, I'm striking." Okay. In this guy's mind, the legacy of we're going to strike was ingrained in him. And so at some point in his adult working life, if he chose in that career path, which he did, at some point he was like, well, we're going to strike. It's just what we do. That's the legacy of what we do. In some families, to Rick's point, and I hate to say it this way, the legacy of some families is we hit the kids. They get out of line, we just smack them around a little bit. That's not a good legacy. It's not a good legacy. And here's the thing. I just said it. Legacy is correctable. Just because dad and granddad did something doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because you had a poor parent doesn't mean you have to be a poor parent. And just because you grew up in a poorly parented home, I know lots of people that grew up in terrible situations that are fine, upstanding citizens. It's because they chose to change their legacy. They chose to correct their legacy. It didn't become a conscious part of their thought process. It became, no, I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to do things differently. There's a guy that was a professional athlete, basketball player. His name was Jamal Mashburn. Jamal Mashburn grew up in South Florida, I believe. Comes to the University of Kentucky to play basketball. Ends up being a multimillionaire and plays in the NBA, I believe, for 10 or 12 years. Jamal Mashburn, several years ago, ESPN did a documentary called Broke. And it was about what athletes did with their money that they made playing professional sports. Jamal Mashburn could have followed down the path of, I'm going to be like a lot of professional athletes. I'm going to get this money and I'm going to blow it. You know what Jamal Mashburn did with his money? He invested it. Jamal Mashburn owns car dealerships. Jamal Mashburn owns restaurants. Shaquille O'Neal, another example. Shaquille O'Neal had only met his biological father a few times. Now, to Rick's point, he had a stepfather that stepped in there. Call him Sarge. But Shaq has invested his money well. And so that's the thing. You know, Mark Cuban, you can study the life of Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban learned his work ethic from his father. Mark Cuban's father told him at 12 years old, he said, I want a pair of shoes. He's like, go work for it. And so Mark Cuban sells trash bags door to door to pay for his shoes. Legacy is correctable. It doesn't have to be a part of your conscious thinking. You could be a poor parent right now and correct that behavior. But Rick, I think that's an excellent point you brought up. Okay, got a few minutes. I want to get to the last part. Who does legacy impact in your life? Who does legacy affect in your life, positively or negatively? And I would say it affects everybody. I'll answer that. I would answer that question this way. Who does legacy affect in your life, positively or negatively? And I would put this in there. Legacy affects everybody. Legacy affects everybody. People you know and people you don't. I would venture to say that many of you have never met Kevin Ward personally. I have. I've sat across the dinner table from Kevin, had conversations with Kevin on the phone. Kevin's a dear friend. I know that Kevin's legacy has affected me. But there are people you've never met in history that maybe they had a saying that affected you. Maybe they had a thought that affected you. Legacy affects everybody, people you know and people you don't. Maybe you never met the child of that person that you affected. They find you later in life and they come up to you and they say, hey, you were friends with my dad. I didn't know you, but he did, and he talked about you a lot, and your wisdom affected me. We'll never know at times the impact our life makes on people. I could post something about intentional encouragement and it get to somebody I don't even know, but because somebody shared it, and then somebody else shared it, and then somebody else shared it, it gets to somebody that needed it at that moment. They might have been in a situation where they contemplated taking their own life. I might never know that person, but because I was intentional about encouragement, I might have been that piece that saved their life. Legacy affects everybody, people you know and people you don't. My legacy is real simple. If today I take my last breath, and my son and I were talking about this the other night. It's like if you go, because what happened with my dad was my dad went to sleep and just didn't wake up. 59 years old. Went to sleep and didn't wake up. My son said the other night, what if you go to sleep and don't wake up? Okay, it's real simple. You or your mom, either one, is usually the last person that I say goodnight to, that I tell them I love them. And my son and I even do the little thing. If you watch the TV show Community, I'll slap my chest and give him 5 as well too. It's just something that we do. You know something? I told him the other night, I said, Bryce, if that happens, you will have been the recipient of Dad's last words, which would have been, I love you, bud. Good night. See you in the morning. If that would have happened, you would have been the recipient of your dad's last words. You would have had a gift that nobody else had. So legacy affects everybody. And to Rick's tremendous point, you can leave a legacy of being a jerk. Okay? You can be a legacy of being a first-class A#1 jerk. And that's why, you have some kids that never go around their parents. They leave home and never have any contact with their parents because their parents did such a poor job of building the correct legacy. Their parents were more interested in smoking cigarettes and drinking beer and getting high. I'm being honest. You know why? Because that's where I live. Because we've got people in Huntington, West Virginia, near where I live, that are more interested in getting high on a daily basis. They're more driven by getting high than they are being a great parent and leaving the right legacy. And I know addiction is powerful. And Rick's exactly right. Some kids don't have a chance out of the gate. But that's where legacy affects everybody. Maybe you're the coach that finds a kid and turns their life around. Maybe you're the person that mentors that young intern in your office. Maybe you're the person that mentors that young person that comes in, and maybe they don't have a real good memory of parents. Maybe they didn't have great parents, and you come and you just share wisdom with them. You connect with them, and you just share wisdom with them, and you're kind to them, and you just treat them well. And you're the legacy that they see. Maybe you're that person that 30 years down the road, when that person you're mentoring who really didn't have a chance at life, who people told them they didn't have a chance at life, you mentored them, and 30 years later, they're the one mentoring people. Maybe they're the one endowing scholarships. Maybe they're the one that's helping people. And they go, well, I had a mentor named Rick. I had a mentor named Lee. I had a mentor named Sharon. I had a mentor named Brian. Lee, have a blessed day yourself, man. Thank you. Maybe you're that person that turns their life around. That's how powerful legacy is. It's how impactful legacy is. Legacy is so powerful. It's so life-changing that it's not about the life. It's not about our legacy anymore. It's about who are we impacting? Who are we affecting? And so today, I hope I've shared some things with you about legacy. Hope I've shared with you some ways that we can use legacy wisely. You know, thinking about, okay, what I say, what I post, what I speak into the world. Listen, old Brian here has done stupid on a lot of different levels. And I've said things to my son that has messed him up. And so the parent that I am at 51 is not the parent I was at 41, and it's sure not the parent I was at 31. But, you know, I'm hoping that the parent and the grandparent that I am at 61 is even better than this version. Why? It's because of legacy. It's because I want to look my little grandchild in the eye. And I want to say, baby, listen. Whether they call me Pap like they did my dad or Papaw, I don't care. I just want to look at him and go, I love you. And pour into them some things. Listen, I'd be remiss. Thank you, Sharon. I'd be remiss if I didn't share my book, People Buy From People. Let me grab it real quick here. If you want a great book on legacy, People Buy From People. That's the book that I wrote about my dad. 10 powerful people lessons from the ultimate people person, my dad. Get in touch with me. I've got copies that I can sign for you. You can buy it on Amazon. I think it's like $10 on Amazon. You know, if you want to reach out to me, I'll sell you one and sign it for you and personalize it and things like that. So again, folks, I appreciate everybody. I'm going to end today's broadcast just a few minutes early because I've got to get to a couple of appointments this morning. But again, take this discussion with you. Appreciate all of you this morning. And thank you for joining us on the Wisdom Seeker podcast. Kevin will be back next week. That's a big thing. Kevin will be back next week. I have had a great time filling in for Kevin and hosting this podcast. And you guys show up next week, give Kevin some love. And I know he's going to have a great broadcast for you next week. But until then, get encouraged and stay encouraged. I'll talk to you soon.